Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast Tax Moves with Glen Birnbaum. Glenn, hey, we were talking earlier, kind of getting the plan together, and you sent me some stuff on basically selling stuff to relatives when within the farm, and how there could be some tax consequences that go along with that.
Yeah, it's something probably one of the trickiest things is you just got to be really careful if you're selling assets to a related party. And the tax code defines a related party different ways. Sometimes the brother counts, sometimes not. So you got to be real careful. But if you're selling to a related party, you definitely should check with your tax advisor first because, what you might think of the tax consequences. If I sell to a third party, hey, what would be why does it matter, whether I sell to a third party or whether I sell something to my son? It should be the same tax consequence. It's not, bottom line, many times. And so just be really careful about it. There are some ways we're going to talk about, some possible solutions, but just big picture takeaway here for this podcast is check with your tax advisor because it's likely there's going to be some hurdles to jump through.
Okay. So give me an example of some of the tax consequences that could come into play here if I were to say,
Yeah.
I'm retired and I want to give my son
So,
a couple tractors or something like that.
yeah, so we got to be careful. The tax code is, it's a lot about, the character of the income. Is it capital gain income or is it ordinary income, right? That's what we call character. And then there's timing of the income. When do I have to recognize it? So character and timing is a lot of just the major thing. So one of the issues can be, probably we'll just say like a building, okay? And so I'll just say, Dad, he bought a building for, $200,000, and now it's worth, let's say $1 million, right? But we've depreciated it. Dad has depreciated it down to $100,000, right? So we bought it for 200, depreciated it down to 100, and if he sells it for $1 million, that'd be a $900,000 total gain, right? And then of that, there'd be $800,000 that would be a long-term capital gain, which is this lower tax rate, right? So the $1 million is what it's worth versus the original cost of $200,000, and I've got an $800,000 capital gain. So if Dad would sell it to a non-related party, easy peasy, $800,000 capital gain. You might say, well, how can I mess this up? Well, if you sell it to an entity that's controlled by your son, okay, so Dad sells to an entity controlled by his son, like an S corp buys it or a partnership buys it, that $800,000 long-term capital gain, which is taxed at lower rates, becomes instead ordinary income to Dad. So it's quite a shock. And the rule is because son can depreciate that building, and the IRS is concerned about kind of gaming the system where Dad, the family is picking up capital gain and they're able to depreciate it, which offsets ordinary income. So that's the character issue. You can have a capital gain recharacterized to ordinary income if it's depreciable. So building would be one. Even like raised breeding livestock would be another one. Land wouldn't be, though. So land is not depreciable by the son, so land would be okay. But even things like goodwill, internally generated goodwill, which we don't have a whole lot in farming, but in other businesses, it can be a problem. So, again, you can have that, hey, I think I have long-term capital gain coming, and it can be converted to ordinary income. That's a pretty big issue.
Okay.
Okay, that's actually not the worst of it, though, Casey.
Oh, it gets worse. Wow. Look out.
So, because likely in that scenario where Dad would be selling that building to son, or really an entity that the son owns, probably the son would be paying Dad over time. Would be what we call seller financing, or it's an installment note, right? So son doesn't have all the money, right? They're going to pay Dad over 10 years, or 15 years, 7 years, whatever it might be, right? And so, if I sell to a third party and I'm getting paid gradually, that capital gain income, that $800,000 of capital gain income, I can pick that up gradually as I receive the payments on the note, right? If I sell to a third party, capital gain. So that's a building capital gain or land capital gain. I can gradually pick it up. It's called the installment sale rule. Pick it up over time. So I can spread that gain out, right, over the life of the payments. So it's kind of nice. Okay, so instead of selling to a third party, though, right, I sell to an entity controlled by my son, and the IRS views that, but I'm basically selling to myself because I'm related to my son, and my son owns this entity. But if I sell this building over time to my son, number one, it's ordinary income instead of capital gains. Number two, much worse, that $800,000 of income is taxed in the first year. So can you imagine that? You're expecting number one capital gains, and hey, it's not that it's ordinary income, but then I have to pick up $800,000 of income, and maybe I only receive $50,000 in cash on installment note. So that is really the big problem. I mean, you can really get into trouble on that. That's the timing aspect. Remember, character and timing. So that's the worst case situation. So you do not want to sell something like that to a related party. You're going to be in trouble, right?
Wow. Okay.
Okay, so, again, there's a lot of different rules, and we don't really have time to get into all of them. You should always consult your tax advisor, but one possible solution is if the son is married, his spouse could own 50% of this entity that's buying the building from dad, and the son only owns 50%, and that would be okay. You can check with your tax advisor, but his son can own no more than 50%. So if his spouse is involved, they could own the other 50%. So that's one possibility. That has, there's other issues you got to deal with there, but just be very careful on selling to related parties. Now, one other thing, what if I'm selling something at a loss to my son, right? And I have the asset appraised, and it's worth, let's say it's a tractor. There's no question about it. This tractor is worth $50,000. But for some reason, I have basis in the tractor of $70,000. So I would have a loss, right, if I sold it to a third party, $20,000. So this may not be the best example with the tractor, but we'll use it. But if I sell that tractor to my son, I don't get to deduct that loss. It's a related party loss rule. Instead, that loss just carries over to my son, and if he ever sells it to a third party, he would get that loss. So you have to watch losses as well. That sometimes they're deferred, or they're not deductible. If you sell it to a related party, again, even if there's no question that you're selling it to them for the right price, it's just a rule the IRS has put in to avoid kind of creating losses, right? Because otherwise they're fearful maybe dad wants to get a loss, sell something, just to create a loss in his tax return, right? And the likeliest person is his son or daughter. So all these rules get pretty complicated, but big picture takeaway is be very careful on related party sales. Check with your tax advisor first.
So where on the 3x5 card does this fit?
Okay. The postcard.
Yeah.
It's not on there yet.
It's not on that part? Okay.
And and just for a little bit of information, you may have been picking up, I've been saying if you sell it to an entity controlled by my son, right, there's a problem. Like a partnership that my son owns more than 50%, or an S-Corp that my son owns more than 50%, we're not sure, but there's literally no rule. It appears that if I would sell an asset just individually to my son, right, not through an entity, individually to my son, but that's actually not a problem. As crazy as that sounds. Right?
So, okay, so if I'm, just some clarification, so if I'm married and me and my wife have this business together, and just for tax purposes, she could own 60% of it and I can own 40 of it and we're good to go?
Yeah. So it only has to be 50%, yeah. But again, if son's not buying, the son is buying the assets from dad, let's just say, but if son sets up an entity and buys the assets from his dad, that's a problem. If son just kind of individually buys the building, it appears, and I looked at some of the leading commentators on this, they say there's no case law on this. There's also very, very limited commentary that this is okay, but any commentary that was found says it's fine. So there are just, we've talked about the gray glitch before, right? There are still kind of glitches or weird things in the code, because it really doesn't make sense that if my son directly buys this building individually, it's fine. It wouldn't trigger ordinary income to dad. But if he sets up an entity, i.e. a partnership or an S-Corp, and he owns 100% of that, that's a problem. It doesn't make a lot of sense. In the case,
No, none. Zero.
that is the rule. And so there are glitches like this still in the code. It's kind of amazing that there hasn't been a case on this to really prove this out. But that's what the leading commentators think. It's actually okay. Very bizarre. So you have to, back to your question, the 3x5 Coast Guard is, I mean, there's about 4 different codes, at least 3 or 4 different definitions of related party. There's probably more, and you have to know which, depending on what you're doing, you got to refer to a different definition. So you just can't chance it. If there's any relationship at all, you should check with your tax advisor first.
Yeah. Well, good thing they didn't define what the 3x5 measurement was on that card, because it's going to take about 3 miles by 5 miles to get all that stuff on there.
Didn't think about that. Yeah, 3 miles by 5 miles.
Pretty big car.
I don't think even 3 by 5 is enough. So.
No, I don't think so.
Maybe meters. Maybe I think we need a little more than a yard. So meters,
we need a lot. All right, Glenn. Well, good information as usual. Like Glenn said, make sure you guys contact your tax advisor on this topic. But if you want to contact Glenn, how would they do that?
Yeah, it's best just to call our office here at Heinlein Van Works. We're in East Peoria, Illinois. Our number is 309-694-4251. Or you can always look me up on Twitter at Glen Birnbaum.
All right. Well, Glenn, thanks for taking time today in your travels to talk to us. And until next week, we'll talk to you then, man.
All right, easy, thanks.
All right, take care, buddy.